Good morning, everybody. I decided to use this nice bell, probably last time for me during the presidency. Welcome, everybody. And you see today weather is much more better than yesterday. So probably you were thinking right thoughts yesterday, as we discussed during the lunch, and you have right wishes for this midsummer special occasion. And I hope today we'll have a really productive day, and not only like formal speeches, but a lot of lively discussions and a lot of good context during the day. And dear participants, welcome in Riga to the meeting of ministers in charge of vocational education and training, the European social partners and the European Commission. And before we'll start, I would like to remind that we're going to use different languages for this session, and interpretation is available from and to Latvian, English, German, French, Italian, and Spanish. And please be informed that this session will be live streamed. Dear Commissioner Thyssen, ministers, representatives of social partners, ladies and gentlemen, I am very honored to open this meeting, which has brought on board all stakeholders responsible for the future of vocational education and training. Diversity of languages is one of our assets, a skill that is essential for professional and personal development. To put a focus on that, let me continue in Latvian for the introductory part of this meeting. So let's use the opportunity to use translation. Dear
colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, just 8 days remain until the moment when the Latvian presidency passes the baton to their Luxembourg colleagues. It is no secret. It was a laborious 6 months, but at the same time I'd like to say that this time has also been very fruitful and rewarding. Today, Riga conclusions, which is one of the most tangible results of the Latvian presidency in the field of vocational education and training, will be submitted for endorsement by the ministers. Riga conclusions is a document detailing the development of vocational education and training in Europe until 2020. This document reflects in its outlines the accomplishments of the previous presidencies. Today, our life is much more dynamic than that of our parents. The world is changing, the industries are changing, jobs and skills required are changing. Manual jobs, as our parents used to know them, will most probably be alien to our grandchildren. And therefore, it is important not to limit our vision by 2020. Within the objectives set by the Copenhagen process, we must try to look further today and start a discussion about the overall competitiveness of European vocational education. Speaking about competitiveness, in the context of today's meeting, I'm very satisfied with the apprenticeship issues, which we will address during the second half of the day. In this regard, I wish to thank the European Commission and especially Commissioner Thyssen, in particular for their contribution. I'm also glad to see the widely represented European businesses in Riga. Involvement of entrepreneurs is very essential for any vocational education and training system. European apprenticeship issues are one of the commonly accepted medium-term objectives for European vocational education, and these are also part of the Riga conclusions. by ensuring that knowledge and skills acquired through learning are in line with the expectations of entrepreneurs and labor market requirements, we raise the competitiveness of the workforce that has acquired key competences. During today's meeting, an exhibition can be viewed in the National Library, showcasing the success stories of the Latvian education system. As detailed in one of them, vocational education in Latvia has long suffered from an undeservedly poor reputation, and this has not been the first choice of young people when thinking about their future. I believe such views are common in many of the countries represented here. However, today's reality requires a different approach, and I believe also a different rhetoric, and rightly so. Therefore, during our presidency, we have set strengthening the prestige of vocational education as an important priority. Qualifications awarded and jobs offered as a result of vocational education must become more attractive, and education path as well as career succession must be ensured, offering personal and professional satisfaction, and ensures a well-provided material situation. For many years, we have been speaking about equal opportunities in vocational education. We have also been speaking about accessibility, attractiveness, and of course the quality, skills, and the role of teachers and an appropriate learning environment. However, there has been little emphasis on innovation and excellence. These two terms are traditionally associated with higher education and science. However, today, innovation is not an end in itself. It is a necessity of life. And therefore, innovation and excellence is the context within which the Latvian presidency has viewed vocational education. We see the vocational education and training as part of the innovation system, and this issue has been undeservedly little discussed so far. In our previous efforts to strengthen the prestige of vocational education, we have ascertained that activities to promote the attractiveness of vocational education and training do not add to its prestige in society directly. We believe that the solution is excellence, innovation, a creative approach, and a flexibility. At the same time, of course, maintaining the already strengthened reputation of vocational education and training as accessible and inclusive education. New strategic partnerships must be built and strengthened at national, regional, and local levels. Advanced and motivating financing models must be implemented, allowing the parties involved to realize their potential. I'm very pleased that several of the next presidencies have included among their priorities innovation of vocational education. This gives hope that the discussion started today will be continued at a more profound and serious level. Latvia has its success stories in the field of vocational education, and one of them is concerning work-based learning. As recently as in 2013, it was just a theoretically familiar area. Having ascertained that no successes can be achieved by using traditional methods, our ministry made an informed decision to take the so-called bottom-up approach, calling on vocational education and training institutions and businesses to start and experiment the implementation of work-based learning on a voluntary basis. Today, the number of educational institutions, students, and companies involved in work-based learning has increased several times. Moreover, work-based learning as a form of vocational education program has been included in legal acts, and work has been started at the governmental level to develop a motivation system for entrepreneurs. We are really proud of this achievement and must also say a big thank you to our social partners and local governments that turned out to be a decisive factor of our common success story. Ladies and gentlemen, at some point in time, something is done for the first time, and alongside the questions what and how, there is also the question why. The why is the question leading to new ideas and solutions. You have to put this question to yourself, to your colleagues, because this makes you think long-term. In many ways, it has been the handwriting of Latvia as a state holding the presidency of the EU Council for the first time. Latvia has tried to ask this question, and I wanted to emphasize that during today's discussion we have an opportunity to view the issues of vocational education development from an unusual perspective. I invite you all to a productive collective discussion regarding the development of competitive European vocational education in the years up to 2020 and beyond. Thank you.
And now, Commissioner, before I give the floor to you, let me just congratulate us on such a widely represented meeting. And I appreciate the involvement of all the stakeholders, not only from the European Union, but also from the European Economic Area and the EU candidate states. I value the high-level support that Latvia has been receiving on making this a thorough event, both in content and in scale, covering policymakers, business representatives, or employers and employees. And now, Ms. Thyssen, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear ministers, social partners, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to attend this meeting of ministers in charge of vocational education and training for the first time since I took on my role as European Commissioner with responsibility for skills. I welcome also the social partners who have a vital contribution to make our discussions. I wish to thank the Latvian presidency for their excellent work in preparing this meeting, offering us an appropriately high-level platform for discussion. As you are aware, we will adopt the Riga conclusions, which set down our priorities for vocational education and training for the coming years. I will also take the valuable opportunity to present you with my broader agenda on skills. It serves to highlight the importance of VAT and indeed apprenticeship in fostering a workforce that help Europe retain its competitiveness and regain strong growth. The Commission's objective is clear: to get the economy back on a path of growth and to create new and decent jobs. The crisis destroyed many jobs, especially those of low-skilled workers. Now, most new job offers require a different and a higher skill set than in the past. We could take the case of the blue economy as just one example. Significant employment growth is expected in this range of sector in coming years, from shipping to fisheries, from ocean energy to seabed exploration, from extraction to mining activities, and so on. Despite their obvious differences, all require a specific and comprehensive knowledge and understanding of the marine environment. Companies in this increasingly innovative and modernizing sector will also be seeking flexible workers adapted to multidisciplinary teams, professionals with a range of skills to apply new technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, there are currently 23.5 million unemployed people across Europe. Around 12 million have been so for more than a year. And more worrying still, 4.7 million young people cannot find a job. Yet we face the paradoxical situation where there are 2 million unfilled vacancies. Employers claim they cannot find people with the right skills to fill these posts. SMEs are particularly affected as they often lack the capacity to invest in further training. If Europe is to get back on a path to fair and balanced growth, we must address this mismatch with labour market needs. We must look to productivity and innovation to maximise the potential of the digital economy. And we must combine forces to develop a suitable skilled workforce. Evidence shows that the most competitive economies invest more in education. These countries also benefit from a private sector which provides more training for employees. With our aging population, we must first get more people into the labour market, young people, women, low-skilled and older workers, and the long-term unemployed. And we must promote progression in quality work that supports rewarding lives and families. Second, we must ensure that the skills available on the labour market match the needs of a dynamic and globalized economy. Currently, there are 68 million European adults who reach only basic levels of proficiency in literacy and numeracy. Yet, these skills are at the core of their ability to perform in most jobs. In the near future, nearly all jobs will also require some level of digital skills, yet 70% of European citizens only have low to basic digital skills. This is not only important for young people seeking their first job, but increasingly for working people who must adapt throughout their careers. Overcoming skill gaps and mismatches requires a better understanding of labour market needs. These must in turn determine the creation of education and training opportunities and influence the supply of career guidance and counselling in schools and employment services. Finally, we must make better use of the available skills, including through enhanced geographical and occupational mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, in this Commission, I have been entrusted with developing a European skills agenda to help Europe reach these goals. My approach is based on 3 strands: better anticipation of skills needs, effective skills development, and more transparency and recognition of qualifications. Predicting the future is not, of course, in any of our skill sets, but I encourage you all to analyze and anticipate long-term needs in national skills strategies. This includes strengthening the understanding of regional and sectoral needs. It is only with this forward-looking perspective that we will succeed in developing a more employable, adaptable, and work-ready labour force. A cornerstone of our skills agenda is cooperation between the world of education and the world of work. Too often, these are poles apart. But if we are to strengthen employability, particularly of young people, and to facilitate smoother school-to-work transitions, we must build stronger synergies between these 2 worlds. Evidence shows that education and training that includes work-based learning pays off. It is a springboard to employment. The starting point, therefore, for improving the attractiveness of our young people to potential employers is the widespread promotion of work-based learning. VAT plays a vital role in supporting transitions from education to jobs and between jobs. It is also best placed to provide tailor-made and quick responses to meet labour market needs. I am convinced that today's discussions and our setting of priorities to modernise VAT will contribute significantly to raising its quality and its attractiveness. Our aim here today is also to showcase the VAT reform agenda and to ensure that the Copenhagen process is fit for purpose. At the same time, VAT should be aligned with overall structural reforms in the Member States as laid down in the country-specific recommendations. They should reinforce our common goal of boosting growth and jobs across Europe. It is also part of the ET 2020 strategic framework with strong links to other education and training sectors. Our reform agenda must be future-focused. Ladies and gentlemen, I also believe that we need to keep in mind a person's own interests and their needs when we work out systemic changes to vocational and education and training. This is where, in my view, VAT has a real added value. It should be specifically targeted to individual needs so that it becomes a first choice to people who wish to nurture their specific talents rather than a second option. It needs to tap into the capacities of all individuals and enable them to fulfill their potential in a chosen career. Ladies and gentlemen, I am confident that the 5 medium-term priorities set down in the Riga conclusions will reinforce this value of VAT. They are focused, interlinked, complementary, and mutually supportive. Let me expand on this. The priorities are closely linked because work-based learning provides the experience and job-specific skills that employers seek. It serves, therefore, as a springboard to employment. But as well as equipping learners with the most sought-after skills to find a new job tomorrow, it provides people with the key capabilities to remain employable over a lifetime. And beyond equipping learners with key competences, VAT also serves the interests of our existing working force. And it equally provides the new skill sets required to keep companies competitive in a fast-changing marketplace. The quality of VAT provision ultimately depends on governments setting the right conditions for quality assurance and the quality of teaching, which is the 5th priority set. Personally, I would consider the further training of VAT teachers and trainers as the top priority. Designing innovative, future-looking reforms and injecting sufficient funds into VAT would simply be undermined by staff not sufficiently qualified or motivated. I am pleased to see this point also on the agenda here today and to have the buy-in of providers to our reform plans. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that Rome was not built in a day and that reforms take time. This is why we are focusing on these 5 key areas. In the next 5 years of the current policy cycle, we have to strengthen work on each of these 5 priorities. And I am convinced that if we are to make a real difference and to boost not only the quality but also the attractiveness of VAT, it is imperative that all stakeholders are on board. I am particularly encouraged by the support of the social partners here. Their involvement is indispensable and their contribution extremely valuable. I am also pleased that providers of vocational training have shown their interest and commitment to the Riga conclusions. The Commission stands ready to assist participating countries to implement VAT reform along with our colleagues in CDFOP and in the ETF. We are stepping up efforts along with other education sectors to improve the quality, access and relevance of education and training. My key message to you is that we need a more structured and stronger involvement of the business world. This is why we are strengthening targeted initiatives, such as the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, which we will discuss more in more detail later today. This is certainly not a new idea, especially in VET, but we will keep repeating it until words become action. In terms of recognition, we are collaborating with various economic sectors to link the recognition of qualifications awarded by international sectoral bodies or multinational companies to the European qualifications framework. These could be diverse qualifications from ICT to banking or welding. We are also looking at cooperation with third countries to boost qualifications transparency between the European Union and other parts of the world. Last but not least, we want to improve our outreach to citizens and businesses with more user-friendly and simpler services. Madam Chair, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to hearing your views on our proposed agenda for skills and VAT reform and to more in-depth discussing with you. I count on your strong involvement and cooperation in order to achieve our goals of a more employable workforce that maximize the benefits of the knowledge-based economy of tomorrow. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Commissioner, for such a deep and broad coverage of our topic and good preparation for the day. And now we'll proceed with our keynote speakers who will share their views on vocational education and training in the context of the new socio-economical and demographic challenges which were mentioned also by Commissioner. And please welcome Mr. Javier Calderón Beltrán, Chair of Business Europe's Education and Training Working Group. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Dear Minister Seile, dear Ministers, dear Commissioner Thyssen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to refer on my keynote about 4 different bullet points. I'm going to start with strengthening Europe's competitiveness. Europe, as you know, is facing a number of challenges today. The most urgent social challenge over the next 5 years is to boost job creation and employment participation in order to reduce unemployment. While we see that some progress is being made with a slight increase in the European Union employment rate, we are unlikely to achieve the European 2020 target of 75% employment. Moreover, the crisis has exposed a number of structural weaknesses, of which a key weakness is the difficulty to integrate new entrants into labour markets. The mismatch between the skills provided by the education and training and those needed on the labour markets is a prime example of this. For example, CDFOP forecast suggests that by 2025, 39% of the labour force will have high-level qualifications, 47% medium level, and 40% will have low or no qualifications. This helps to show that is not a lack of education or training, but a mismatch in the skills and qualifications that people have, relative to the needs of the labour markets. That is the problem. A key element to foster employment and to improve Europe's competitiveness is therefore the development of stronger links between the worlds of education and employment. Europe's ability to compete globally will also depend on developing innovative ideas and bringing them to market more quickly. This requires a productive and skilled workforce and the improvement of both specific skills, such as in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and basic skills and competences. In this respect, there are two specific issues that I would like to highlight related to the Europe's future workforce and skill requirements. Now I'm going to refer about the demographic change. The first is the project changes to Europe's demographic composition and the impact that this will have on the size and productivity of Europe's workforce and ultimately on our competitiveness. In Europe, the combination of a growing aging population and a shrinking workforce means that an increasing number of older persons will be economically dependent on a decreasing number of working people. Whereas there is often the temptation to look at projections up to 2040, 2050, or even 2060. We need to concentrate on the here and now and to start to implementing the policies that will address these demographic challenges. A crucial aspect of this is ensuring that the European Union has a workforce of sufficient size and productivity with the required range of skills and competences. My bullet point is number 3, is about digitization. Secondly, if we talk about increasing Europe's competitiveness and the skills required to achieve this, another issue for business is digitization. Digitization fosters innovation by giving companies the possibility to shorten time to market, increase flexibility and product customization, and ultimately achieve higher sales of both existing and new products. Digital is therefore crucial to ensure Europe's competitive advantage in the global economy and can be a driver of growth and jobs. For example, linking industrial automation with IT applications over the Internet will create intelligent networks along the entire value of chain. This will help deliver efficiency to European Union industry and services. By 2025, Europe could see its manufacturing industry at a gross value worth of 1.25 trillion euros. Moreover, digital entrepreneurship is critical to create new jobs and innovative ideas, accelerating the pace of innovation in Europe. For example, from 2013 to 2018, the app economy is expected to triple its revenues and generate 3 million jobs. However, for companies to truly benefit from digitization, it is essential that there are appropriate education and training pathways in place to provide the skills that companies need across all sectors of the economy. Now I'm going to refer about the role of VET to responding to these challenges. Vocational education and training can play an essential role in fostering employability, competitiveness, and economic prosperity. To address skills mismatch, education and training systems need to be reformed to make them more responsive to labor needs. This includes greater involvement of employers' organizations and companies in the design and delivery of VET curricula, particularly apprenticeship schemes. The anticipation of skill needs at local and regional level and an organized exchange of practices across Europe also have the potential to help overcome skills mismatches. CEDEFOP and the Commission could organize an exchange of best practice on how the short-term anticipation of skill needs can be improved to foster mutual learning in this respect. Additionally, worker mobility has a role to play in matching labor demand and supply and helping to overcome skills shortage. Mobility between education and training pathways is also important, and reinforcing the links between higher education and vocational training systems will help to provide the skills that are required. To address the need for people with STEAM and digital skills, it is important to strengthen the labour market's relevance of initial VET. Notably, this concerns the development and strengthening of work-based learning opportunities, particularly dual learning apprenticeships systems. Exploring the role of apprenticeships is promising new sectors. For example, the provision of e-apprenticeships to train people, such as in digital and ICT-related occupations. This is testament to the new routes and opportunities that are being developed in response to present-day skill needs. But more traditional ones continue to be just as important. Employers will get more involved in apprenticeship schemes when they are effective in meeting their skill needs. A positive contribution in relation to the investment made to welcome and train apprenticeships is also needed to motivate more employers to create apprenticeships placements. Therefore, putting in place the system and structures that allow for the cost-effective engagement of employers and which give them greater ownership over apprenticeship schemes is an important area to focus in the coming years. To address the issues posed by demographic change, it is important to upskill and retrain adult and older workers through opportunities for continuous VET on the basis of a cost-sharing approach between government, employers and workers. To foster entrepreneurship, there is a role for VET in providing people with the skills and key competences that will enable them to set up their own company. Hand in hand with these priorities is ensuring the initial and continuous professional development of VET teachers, trainers, and mentors. In conclusion, VET has an important role to play to address the key skills challenges that Europe is facing. In meeting these challenges, the main elements for employers are ensuring that VET is better aligning with labour market needs, and that appropriate conditions and systems are put in place to foster employer engagement in VET. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Luca Visentini, Confederal Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Minister Seile, Commissioner Thyssen, ministers, colleagues from the social partners. First of all, I would like to tell you that I'm here representing the European Trade Union Confederation, that is the confederation gathering almost 90 trade unions all over Europe and representing more than 50 million workers around Europe. And we, as the European Trade Union Confederation, really welcome the conclusions that will be endorsed during this conference today. They are the result of an excellent cooperation between the Latvian presidency, the European Commission, the Member States and the European social partners, and we would like to thank you for this cooperation, first of all. We had indeed an in-depth and very fruitful discussion and a very positive involvement of all actors, including the social partners. The conclusions, together with the Member States' declaration and the background document from Commissioner Thyssen, provide, from our point of view, an effective framework to face the challenges we have in front of us. In fact, we need, first of all, shared analysis if we want to achieve concrete results. And we have really appreciated the acknowledgement that a huge number of jobs have been destroyed. The Commissioner mentioned it, and also that to overcome the crisis we need higher level products and to invest on human capital, and that competition on labour cost is not the solution for the European economy. The idea that was very popular a few years ago, that education and training tools alone could create jobs, has been finally dropped. And job creation through investment, also in education and training, is now at the core of the European strategy. However, we still see too much emphasis on the need to boost mainly higher skills, digital skills, sectorial and so-called STEM skills. Everything this is really important, but innovation and upgrade are fundamental at any level for any category of workers. All types of jobs should be improved in quality, and innovation is not a matter of devices and technology only, but mainly a matter of improving processes and better organizing, particularly at the workplace level. Another element to be considered is that skills needed in the labour market are continuously changing and varying according to the sectors and the regions. This means that we need increased flexibility and transversality in considering skills, and that we need not skills only, but first of all more comprehensive competence and qualification among workers and job seekers. Adaptability and capacity to learn, general culture alongside basic and technical skills, that's what we should promote. All people and workers should be included through a more holistic approach. We have to increase quality in both education and training, and we need permeability between the two. We have obviously to involve students and young needs initial education and VET, but also workers through continuous training and lifelong learning. Employability doesn't mean only the possibility for the youngsters to find a job in line with their competence and skills. It means also the possibility for workers to retain their jobs and to face the increasing changes on the labour market, and for unemployed people to get the chance to re-enter the labour market with dignity and not through precarious and lowest jobs. Employability and quality, they increase the attractiveness of VET and more in general of education and lifelong learning. We should never forget that better competence, qualification and skills are not only to serve the economy and labour market needs. They should also serve personal development, career and higher salaries for the people. That's why recognition of competence and skills at the workplace, on the labour market, in the society is essential, even more if they have been acquired through informal and non-formal paths. So, on the basis of such analysis, the Riga conclusions can provide us with a comprehensive and effective set of active measures. Some few examples. Investment should be boosted in education and training in general and in VET in particular. But to achieve it, the country-specific recommendations should be made more coherent and not push at the same time for cuts in public spending. In this respect, the education and training area has to be preserved. And also private investment on companies has to be encouraged and mutual investment of social partners supported as well. Quality in VET has to be promoted, and it passes first of all through the value of the teaching and training profession, but also through better focus on training outcomes. Work-based learning is fundamental, but we cannot ignore that apprenticeship is declining everywhere in Europe, unfortunately. It's of course a consequence of the crisis, but we have to consider also other factors, as for instance the lack of quality in training and working conditions for apprentices. The alliance we signed is an excellent tool we will discuss this afternoon, as the Commissioner mentioned, but we have to implement it through innovative actions. And the ETUC idea to have a quality framework for apprenticeship and work-based learning is one of these possible actions. We are delivering an important project together with the employers in the social dialogue framework exactly on this topic. Beside work-based learning, we would like to emphasize also workplace learning, or if you prefer to call it continuous VET or lifelong learning. This is the tool that mirrors work-based learning. It is to ensure that also the rest of the labour market is included in skills improvement and employability through competence. The ETUC will continue to insist on the need for an alliance also for workplace learning involving public actors and social partners. This is needed to mobilize public authorities, but first of all, us as social partners on the labour market. Recognition of skills and competences is another area where social partners can bring a relevant contribution, and it already happens in several countries. But unfortunately, too many obstacles still exist for full implementation of this action. Too little efforts from some member states, not all of them, we have to recognize it. Too little knowledge and usability of the incredible series of tools made available by the European Commission. Better coordination has to be considered together with possible streamlining. A last word on skills forecast. The mission impossible in our never-ending battle against skills mismatches. We can trust European initiatives on this area, but only if these initiatives are really able to reach the reality on the ground. No studies, no statistics can really do that, but the daily experience of employers and trade unions in facing workplaces and the concrete problems and shortages and needs they manage there together. This is the reason why, for instance, we don't like so much the sector skills alliances and prefer, on the other side, the sectoral skills councils, because they properly involve social partners, in particularly in the sectors, in mapping skills needs. For the same reasons, I would like to tell Commissioner Thyssen here today that we are really worried by the attempt coming from the European Commission to reduce the social partners' representatives in the governing board of the CEDEFOP. This agency is tripartite, according to the treaty, and its task will be also to accompany the implementation of the strategy we are discussing about today. Implementation has to happen on the ground, in the countries, in the sectors and regions, and on the workplaces. How can this be done without all the national social partners? Partnership with social partners is our dogma. and we really welcomed the tone and the commitments in the Member States' declaration and in the Riga conclusions on this point. The new priorities and deliverables are really well targeted and concretely achievable, and we, as the social partners, are ready to cooperate with full engagement for the achievement of the goals we have set together. We are sure that you will take us seriously on board for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now please welcome our next speaker, Mr. Simon Field, project leader of the Directorate for Education and Skills, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, to outline that development around the globe. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ministers, commissioner, heads of delegation, colleagues. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity of speaking to you today. And I'm going to talk about 3 challenges and also 3 opportunities for vocational education and training. I will call it VET. And I think I'll be echoing many of the points that have been made by earlier distinguished speakers, and I have the difficult challenge of doing that in a way that doesn't just bore you. But let me start by looking a little bit into the future. Now, normally when I hear predictions about social and economic developments of the future, I reach for my detective novel because I prefer more entertaining forms of fiction. But there are some things that you can predict. Demographic change is predictable. So one global prediction I will offer you. If you look at the adult workforce in some of the big emerging economies, and I'm going to take China as my example, I mean, the workforce in those economies is in most cases pretty low skilled generally, on average, and poorly educated. That's adults on average. But if you look at young people, and let's take China, the position is completely different. In China now, 3/4 of young people complete upper secondary school, around half of them in vocational programs, but that's actually a recent phenomenon. So what does that mean in the future? That means there's big differences between young people in emerging economies and the older generation. And that means that 20 years from now, the Chinese workforce will be much higher skilled than it is today, as better educated young people gradually replace older workers. So if you think that countries like China pose a competitive challenge today, and they do, then just wait 20 years, then you will really see something. Now, if you turn to developed countries, how are they responding to this enormous challenge? Well, many European countries have invested in education, schooling, and often you do find that the young are also better skilled than their parents, so that again, as young, better skilled people enter the workforce, average skills will improve. So hopefully in Europe, we might be able to keep up with the challenge. But actually, countries vary a lot in how well they've managed to do that. You've heard from the Commissioner earlier about the challenge of low numeracy and literacy in Europe. And let's just look at a comparison between England and Poland. And we can compare England and Poland using the OECD's survey of adult skills. And if you look at the adult populations of those two countries, you find that the skills mix looks pretty similar between those two countries. Okay. But look at what happens when we look at young people. There you find Poland and England are marked out in red. And this chart shows that young Poles are much less likely to have weak basic skills than young people in England. And that means that, other things being equal, the workforce in Poland will progressively outclass that of England in terms of literacy and numeracy as the population ages. But of course, migration could change that picture. If able young Poles moved to England, that could equalize the skills of the workforce. Now, what about a second challenge? The great competitor of vocational education and training, the siren call of University for All, sometimes promoted by formidably effective higher education lobbies. Increasingly, we find that countries are realizing that model of career preparation has its limits. And let's go to Korea as an example, a remarkably successful economy, world-class basic schooling, and 70% of young people enter tertiary education. But hang on, let's not get too excited about those 70%. That 70%, they're not all Samsung engineers. Some of that's actually training young people to serve as baristas in coffee shops. That's 2 years of training in junior college. And I've tasted the coffee and it's okay, but 2 years? But of course, if 70% of the cohort enter tertiary education, you may reasonably expect that those working in coffee shops will indeed have this level of education. Now, in the face of that, vocational education actually is moving up the policy agenda everywhere, not just in Europe, but all over the world, and particularly in those big emerging economies that are going to be some of the big players in the 21st century. Another one, Indonesia, huge country, 250 million people. At the moment, only 1/4 of young people compete upper secondary school, and the aim is to increase that figure to 90% in the next 5 years, and that's mainly through a massive expansion of vocational high schools. Hugely ambitious program. But alongside these two challenges in the global environment, emerging economies and academic education, there are huge challenges within VET itself and how it's organized. And some of those are specific to individual countries, and I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years going around the world looking at different VET country systems. And we found a challenge which is common to all countries, literally everywhere, from Chile to China, and in the many European countries in between, and it's one you've already heard quite a bit about this morning. It's here again, I'm echoing the words of the Commissioner. There's just too big a gap between the world of vocational learning, that's that world over there on the left, that I've stereotyped, of course, and the world of work, again, another stereotype. Employers and trade unions over there on the right. Now, sometimes there are good bridges across that divide, but rather too often that gulf means programs and qualifications developed without sufficient employer engagement, vocational teachers that lack familiarity with industry, and insufficient quality work-based learning. And a lot of what we do in our country reviews is to work with countries to find ways of building bridges across that divide, because understanding that there is that divide there is a consensus on that. Finding ways across that divide, that's hard. And here are some of the countries we've worked in dark blue, and then in Europe. We're just completing a review in Slovakia at the moment, and our thanks to the European Commission for their partnership in this exercise. Now, when we do these reviews, a lot of what we do is simply to spread the word, pass on ideas about how to address the challenges from one country to others. So let me tell you about 3 areas where, in our view, there are opportunities. There are things that can be passed from one country to another. Now, the first one, again, I'm echoing points that have been made a number of times already this morning, making better use of work-based learning. You're going to be talking quite a bit about apprenticeships today, and very properly so. Apprenticeships are a fantastic institution, but one of the things that underpins apprenticeships and also goes beyond them is work-based learning. For work-based learning is also a very important element in vocational programs outside apprenticeship. Why is it important in our view? Because the workplace is a great place to learn the hard skills, because it's where you find the latest equipment. It's a great place to learn the soft skills, because that's where you learn how to deal with people. It's a great place to learn from the real experts, because the people who really know how to do the job, you find them in the workplace. And it's a great place to get a job, because the student gets to know the employer and the employer gets to know the student. But in addition to all those things, work-based learning is a fantastic way of building a partnership between vocational programs and the world of work, building those bridges across the gulf that I've been talking about. But work-based learning is actually up against a powerful lobby. It's an academic lobby, which for many years has been telling us that all real grown-up learning takes place in a classroom, presided over by an academically trained teacher and leading to an academic examination. And that view just has to change. It has to. And we would argue that all vocational programs should contain some work-based learning as an integral, mandatory, credit-bearing, quality-assured element of the program. When we ask training providers about this, they often say, well, it's a good idea in principle, but it's hard in practice because it's very difficult to get the employers to play. They're reluctant. Now, we've heard an example from Latvia about what Latvia has been doing to encourage the development of work-based learning. And I'm not going to give you another example from Europe. Of course, there are lots of good examples from Europe, but I'm going to go to a country that has huge challenges, just emerging from the Arab Spring, where it's still spring, I think, Tunisia. Some programs we've looked at recently in Tunisia with all the challenges of weak infrastructure in that country. They have made mandatory work-based learning with all the qualities that I've described work. Can it be made in Europe? For sure it can. Now, a second opportunity lies in the post-secondary domain. And I'm thinking here of the shorter programs, 6 months to 2 years, too often neglected. Now here in countries, there are some strong systems. For example, you can look at the IUTs in France, many other examples. You find the rather different sort of model of the professional examinations that you find in the Meister programs, for example, in Germany and Austria. You look across the Atlantic at the United States, you find 20% of the labor force actually have these sorts of short vocational post-secondary qualifications as their highest qualifications, their certificates and associate degrees. But rather too often, these sorts of programs are squeezed between university programs on the one hand and upper secondary school programs on the other. Now, here's a little bit of a picture about what different countries are doing in this post-secondary domain, and you can see that it's actually hugely variable. But the evidence for, what's the evidence for demand for these sort of short programs? Well, actually, part of it is just common sense. Not all occupational skills take 3 or 4 or 5 years at university, any more than it takes 2 years to learn how to make a cup of coffee. And in fact, Sedefop are predicting nearly 2/3 of employment growth in the EU countries in the decade to 2020 will fall in the technicians and associate professionals category that we can link to this sector. And last but not least, I want to come to innovation in VET. And I think the emphasis, Minister, which you've placed on innovation is very much welcome in this domain of VET. Innovation is not something that simply happens in universities, as you've said. And VET needs innovation and a systematic approach to innovation, and that means a willingness to try out new things, evaluating them carefully, dropping the failures, and building on the successes. An evidence-based approach. And I want to finish now with just one example of innovation. The funding of VET is usually quite simple. I mean, usually flows to the training provider according to student numbers and the type of program. Now, one problem with that model is that it offers no incentives for partnerships between training providers and employers. Those partnerships that we've been talking about, we've all been talking about, as being so fundamental to the success of VET. Now, there is an innovative funding model that could help. And interestingly, it has been implemented in 2 countries that I'm aware of, maybe more. One of them, Sweden, and the other country is Barbados. And they're 2 countries which we don't normally bracket together. Now, in Sweden, the higher vocational education system, which operates in this post-secondary space that I've just been talking about, provides a pool of funds, and those funds are only obtainable by training providers bidding for those funds in partnership with employers, the employers that provide the work-based learning. And the great advantage of that model is that partnership is built into eligibility for the funding rather than something that has to be awkwardly bolted on at the end. Now, in Barbados, it's a very similar model that's being trialed with the support of the Inter-American Development Bank. Now, in both contexts, the evidence on outcomes looks rather favorable. Now, often in VET, we talk about all the challenges because it's very difficult to get the kind of partnerships going without the long history and the culture that is particularly enjoyed by the traditional dual system countries. And of course, that is a challenge. But one of the interesting things about this funding model is with the right incentives, it can promote partnership and work-based learning in very different contexts, Sweden and Barbados. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Field. And I would like to thank all our keynote speakers. And this has been great preparation for our discussions. And we will continue with our discussions now in the parallel sessions on the future of the Copenhagen process and the current challenges for competitive European VET 2015-2020 and beyond. Each session brings together ministers of EU member countries, candidate countries, European Economic Area countries, European Commission, and high-level representatives of the European-level social partners. List of participants, guidelines, and background materials for each session have been distributed, and I hope all of you have them. The first session will take place in the hall Zemgale, 2nd floor, and will be chaired by Mr. Verbic Srežan from Serbia. The second session will take place in the room hall Kurzeme, mezzanine floor, and will be chaired by Mr. Peter van Islemuden from the Netherlands. And the third session will take place in room number 206, 2nd floor, and will be chaired by Mr. Torbjørn Røe Isaksen from Norway. Yeah, okay. And please note that the working language during the sessions going to be English. After the discussions, we will have a coffee break, which will be served at the hall Daugava on the 2nd floor, and we will continue our plenary session here in the hall Riga at 12 o'clock. And now I would like to invite you to go straight to the parallel sessions, and please follow the signs, and the presidency team will help to find the place. Thank you for this.